Thank you again to our Teachers of the Year for joining us for lunch. You are more than welcome to stay for the program, but if you have things to get on with your day, please feel free. We are going to get on with our programming. So I would like to welcome up Chair Mosteller to make a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you all. I'm so glad to be amongst you. As I think of our paradigm and what has happened in the state with different charter authorizers, and we know that we have had the energy and the intensity to carry up this load in a wonderful way for these children that are now under our tutelage. As I look at what the Department of Education, I just want to run through this very quickly, what the South Carolina Department of Education, the reforms they've done in 2026, these reforms, they say, and it's true, are reshaping charter accountability and governance. These are very big issues. First of all, so I'm just going to run down some of these, and you think of our paradigm and how we are already way ahead of this game, because we will see in these words who we are, what our standards are. That's how high we are in excellence. Sponsors become authorizers. We have always been an authorizer because we know that that is a word of leadership. It's a word of leadership. They are insisting on much stronger oversight and accountability. Who in this room doesn't believe that we have the most accountable charter school district in the state? Here's another great word that is always a friend to us: transparency. Transparency requirements expand significantly. We have lived that because of the people that you are and the leadership that we have here in Chris. New rules for charter transfers, that's a little more. State oversight, the state is realizing this too. State oversight of authorizers increases. We are glad for that. We are glad for that. We have everything to show and nothing to hide. And then replication is an important thing, the funding formula changing, and management organizations, those management organizations, they're specifically defined. So it's very clear cut who does what in that kind of scenario with that school. And so I can't say, now here's number 10, greater emphasis on governance and ethics. We would all be in so much favor of that. And I'm telling you, I believe when they looked to work on this, that they saw that there is an effort at the South Carolina Public Charter School District to be this in character, to be this. These are the things that ring in our hearts because of who you are. Greater emphasis on governance and ethics, an overall difference in philosophy, focusing now on accountability, transparency, governance, financial oversight, state supervision of authorizers. These are the places that good has taken us. And I will say that you stand as the army and the caretakers of the strongest gate in South Carolina for public charter schools. And just know that when I read this article, I see our character footprint pasted on every page. And I think that's a great compliment to you all and all the work that you do to bring those kind of statistics back into importance in this assessment of this type of educational paradigm. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
All right, and we're going to have Superintendent Neely come and kick us off for the 26-27 school year.
Maybe we can focus the projector. Yeah. Does everybody have a copy of this? Yeah, okay. Just in case we can't get it focused. Is it me or is it my new glasses or is it? Ah, okay. All right. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes just to kind of talk about where we've been before we start focusing more on about where we're going. And I think there's a lot of victories that have occurred this year with this team that I'm really proud of. First of all, I think one of the great champions of this district is our board. And I think staff, we should give them a round of applause. Because we recognize that strong leadership at the top is important. And we appreciate you, board, for the leadership and guidance that you give this entire district. And we're inspired by your Kids First, the love of Kids First, your love of the Spark, and the love of the staff. And we couldn't do what we do without your support. And we also recognize that you're free volunteers. You don't get paid to be on this board. And it means a lot that you would dedicate your time and service to our district, our children, and our state. So, I'm sorry this is blurry, but you've got your copy. So follow along with me. Let's look at our year of extraordinary accomplishments. And I'm going to start left to right. So first of all, I think it's pretty amazing that this district ran 2 districts at the same time this past school year. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Now, we know that the Department of Ed historically has had to go in and take over a district. And, I don't know if this has ever happened before in America where another district has had to take over another district, but we did it. And even today at the board meeting, here at the lunch with some of our new partners, they have expressed to me the cohesion and how easy the transition has been. And they've all relayed to me that you all provide such great support. It's quality support. And they're really saying that. I know they mean it. And so I think that shows the dedication that you all have to our mission, vision, and values and our motto of Kids First. But also the fact that you see the spark in each of our school leaders, our teachers, the faculty, the staff, the parents, and the kids. And so I'm just very appreciative that we've been able to get through this. It was challenging at times. It was not easy, but we did it. And the department trusted us to do that. And that's a big part of leadership, that Superintendent Weaver and her team trusted this board and this staff to be able to take over a district and transfer those schools seamlessly so those kids could transition without ever noticing. And I would suspect that most parents don't even know, because their school open, the school had money, the kids are there, the teacher's there, they're able to do what they're supposed to do. And that's really our job, is in the background, we're the ones making those things happen. I think another great accomplishment, and honestly, if you'd asked me 7 years ago, it's been 7 years now since I first became superintendent. We're in our 7th school year. And if you'd asked me then, when we were at 15,500 students, if I ever thought that 7 years later we would be over 30,000 students, I just wouldn't have believed that. I mean, that we would double in size in less than a decade. And I remember back during COVID, reporters were asking us, they said, well, do you think that y'all are going to have all this attrition? So you got all these kids that are coming into your district. Are they going to leave? I mean, Eric, you remember that? I mean, constantly, every time I answered reporters' questions, they said, aren't they just going to go back to their zone district? And I said, no, I don't believe it. Because the parents are in charge. And when the parents are in charge and they're empowered and they experience a good thing in school, they don't ever look back, right? Those of you that have kids know what I'm talking about. So 30,000 plus students, 55 schools. Close to 60% of our students are students of poverty. 7 years ago, we were at 47%. And close to 20% of our students are students with disabilities. We're a majority minority district. I mean, those are amazing stats. And by the way, we didn't do any kind of special program, some kind of government intervention or anything. It was about a philosophy that parents believed in. And they chose to come to our district, not because we were offering anything more than the trust that we would believe in their child. Strong academic performance. So the report cards come out in October. We have preliminary data, which I think was released a little too early, in my opinion, because the department hasn't, done their work on the business scale. But if you look at our performance over the last 7 years, we've continued to perform, with or at or above the state in almost every metric. And that includes our students of poverty and disabilities. We've continued to close the achievement gap in South Carolina. We don't know what the current closure is. We're at 20% now, but I suspect we're going to continue to see, a closure in the gap. Meanwhile, the state, they have a much larger gap. Fiscal strength, and I'll be honest with you, board, when I think back to the decisions this board made, and it predates some of you, to hire Michael Tom and Nick Michael to run, Nick first, to run the finance team and get the district in good shape. I mean, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. I'll never forget when I was a consultant to the district when Nick was hired. I didn't know that 8 months later I would become the superintendent. And I remember Nick was sitting up there with the mic and they were asking him all these hard questions about the budget and the audits had been late. There had been findings. And, I'm looking at Nick and I'm like, man, he's kind of inheriting a mess. I mean, I'll be surprised if this guy returns to work the next day. Well, 7.5 years later, he's still here. And guess what? He built a great team. He took the best from the other districts and he brought them on the staff. And we're the only district in South Carolina that can say that we have no debt. We own 100% of our assets. Yeah. We have a healthy rainy day fund. I think, up to 6 months right now, Nick? Yeah. And, of course, thanks to the state's eligible account, we've been able to increase, that rainy day fund through smart investments. And I'll say very smart. And then, of course, I would say a finance team second to none in South Carolina. So I'm really proud of our fiscal health. And then accountability that means something. I don't brag about this, but I do talk about it a lot. We've closed 11 schools in 7 years, 6 this year. And while it's nothing to brag about because families were impacted, families that made choices, those boards and those school leaders made bad decisions. And the reasons are various. But at the end of the day, the state of South Carolina is expecting us to have high-quality charter schools. And if they're not providing a high-quality charter school where every child can learn and grow and prosper, then that school really should not operate. And there's a mechanism for that. That's why we have a very good lawyer, too. But at the end of the day, we're going to continue to hold our schools accountable. We've got more than a handful of schools right now that I really want to see strong improvement and growth. And we're going to be looking at that. And thanks to the AFO, we have our dashboard where we can look and examine all the key parts, the academics, the finance, and the operations. I'm going to go down to the second line. So where do we go from here? Our focus. So for me, the number one focus is leadership matters. We have 25 new school leaders this year in our district. I believe Cameron told me they have about 20 in their district. So out of all the charter schools in the state, half of the schools have a new leader. And we've really kind of seen that trend for the last several years. Jackie, I think, told me that in our district we have 500 new employees, not counting the Limestone folks that came over. So this is teachers and other staff that are brand new to the district this year. And that concerns me because, what do we need in leadership? We need consistency. Consistency in message, consistency in showing up, consistency in intent, accountability, character. And so I think one of the things that we really need to be focusing on this year is not only continuing to build ourselves up in terms of our leadership capacity, but help and support our schools in terms of their capacity. because when I look at the schools that are experiencing some challenges, which I think are opportunities, a lot of that I think could be attributed to the leadership inconsistency that we've seen at the school level. We must model the way, and we do. We're the tip. In the Army, we like to say, when you're leading the way, you're the tip of the spear. And we are the tip of the spear in South Carolina. We collectively and as individuals talk differently than anybody else in a school district in South Carolina. And I'm very happy about that. I do not talk like other superintendents. I don't look like other superintendents. I don't mean physically. I act differently than they do. And it's not because I intentionally do that. It's just because who I am. You all are the same way. None of you are like your peers in other school districts. You all think differently. You put kids first. It's the mission first and the values that we hold dear. When I go to these superintendent meetings, and look, I don't intend to come across as critical, but I sit there in those meetings and I listen to them, and I'm like, where are the kids in this? It's all about the adults. All of you are here because you're about the kids. And I know that. I see that in your eyes. Autonomy must have a purpose. So we need to continue. Part of the Charter Act is, we're supposed to be innovative. Take the great innovative parts that we see in the marketplace, in a zone district, or even other charter sectors. That's great. But don't try to be like the school down the street. Meet the unique needs that you've outlined in your charter, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to hold these schools accountable, but at the same time, give them the autonomy to execute their mission, vision, and their values. I believe strongly in autonomy. When I was a school leader, I had all kinds of issues with the district because I said, where's the autonomy in this? Like, we're the local board, we're the local school leader, we know what's best for our kids. Now, if I'm not doing something right or we're not complying with the law and the regs, call us out and we'll comply. And I think we need to have that same attitude with our schools, but at the same time, they've got to be innovative, they've got to be unique, and they've got to live by their charter. That's their governing document. Autonomy requires accountability. So we have a new Charter Act now, Act 123. We'll never forget it, right? Act 123. And when I look at the Charter Act, we played a big part in helping shape the accountability measures that are in there. And we've been doing this for over 7 years. And it took that long to finally get some of these accountability measures in there that we believed in. The other authorizers have got to live by the same standards that we do. I'm all about a free market. I'm a free market guy. But we can't have one set of market players having this unfair advantage that we don't have. So let's just live by the same rules and then let's just go compete. But I think the accountability piece is important. I talk about it all the time. I talk about it on the radio because I want the public to hear that we do, respect the resources they give us. It's their taxpayer dollars. It's your taxpayer dollars. So don't we want it to go to the kids? Don't we want it to be spent on the right things? Behind the data is a child. I think one of the things that bothers me every time this year, and it's bothered me this week, and with some of the reporter questions we're getting, and I know this is live, but everybody gets so focused on the data. And I believe data is very important. And we need to know what the data says, and we need to properly interpret the data. But behind every one of those data points is a child. And I think that gets lost in these conversations. We've got a question right now that we've got to respond to about the virtual schools, about the SE Ready. And the press wants to know, well, why are the virtual charter schools, not performing better? Why is their data so bad? I think they're asking the wrong question. Who are the children behind the data? If they actually would look at the children and see the children the way we do, they would better understand the data. Because the virtual children that are coming into our schools are coming from where? Where are they coming from? Where are they transferring from? Somebody answer. Well, everywhere, but they're coming from zone school districts who did not see that child. They failed that family. And the family, as a last resort in many cases, made a decision for their child to go to a virtual school. And guess what virtual education is dependent on? The parent, the guardian, the grandmother, because they're the learning coach. They're the ones that are sitting there. And by the way, when the camera's off, it's expected they're the ones that are going to help the child understand and master the material and do the homework. Well, I know about this, at a very up close and personal way. And many of you do too. And I know John was very impacted last week when he went to one of our virtual schools for their first day. And he went to their office, school office, and they were able to put him into certain classrooms. If you want to understand the data, you got to know who's behind the data. And I think we need to change the narrative on that. Can our virtual schools be better? Yes. But virtual education is not optimal for most kids. Those kids that are in our virtual charter schools, they're there because it is literally, almost for many of them, the last hope. It's the difference between dropping out or homeschool. Is that what we want in our public system, where families finally just give up? And by the way, most of these families live in rural South Carolina. 80+% pupils in poverty, a disability rate that's 3 times the state average. And in many ways, many of these zone districts have given up on those kids, and they came to us. So it's our responsibility to see them when others didn't. And then the spark of the child. And this goes to seeing the child. I'm doubling down on this message. I think it's really connecting with people. I know it connects with you all, but it's seeing the spark in every single child. Seeing their heart, seeing their passion. All of these kids want to learn. They want to learn. They need somebody that sees them and believes in them, believes in their dreams. Sees the fact that children want relationship with other children, connection with their teacher. When I think back to being a child myself, and all of us were this way when we were young and in kindergarten, the teacher will always ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? Everybody's been asked that question, right? A lot of times I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a fireman, a policeman. It was always these noble callings that children have when they're young about the things they want to be. And then sometime later, after they, move up to first grade, second grade, and on, and they just kind of enter the system, it's like, what happened to the dream? And then we've got so many kids today that they don't even, I've had a student this year that she told me, she's like, I don't have any dreams. I was told I was too young to dream. What did a system do to that child to make her think that she didn't even have the ability to dream? That's not seeing the spark in every child. Because we all know that every child has a dream. We know that because we have dreams. And you don't grow out of your dreams. No, I did not become an astronaut. I realized I had to be good in math and science. I was not. I was better with words. But the reality is, that's what I wanted to be. And there was nothing wrong with that. And I did, by the way, have teachers that embraced me and believed in that. But it's because they saw the spark in me. And so now it's our job to advocate on behalf of the child and the spark that each of them carry within them. At this time, I'll answer any questions that you might have, but I just felt it was important. Let's talk about some of the great successes that you have achieved, and then let's talk about the things that we should be focused on going forward. Any questions, comments? All right, Emily?
Thank Thank you. Chris, thank you for your leadership. I think that what you had to say ties in really well to our annual plan. I also think that a lot of our staff will see some things reflected in this that we kind of talked about in our skip levels. I told a number of you, that's actually in our annual plan, so I hope that you see those things pop out. So in your packets, you have a copy of our 26-27 annual plan. And I am just going to walk you through what we're planning for the year. You'll remember in January or February, we came back together and said, all the schools are transferring, we need to take a pause on some things. And so you'll see some of those things wrapped back up in here. So my slides will have a continuation of some things and then circling back on. So in our focus area of organizational development, our long-range goal remains to be recruiting, developing, and retaining talented staff who reflect the students and schools we serve. Much of the work is about continuing the practices that we're already doing, like the board training, strong onboarding, partnerships that help diversify our talent pool, meaningful staff development. We are circling back on succession planning, so we're picking back up that goal of getting a playbook for every staff member position to do some of that succession planning. Just, as we grow, we want to make sure that organizationally we're remaining really strong and we have all of those things in place. And by the way, thank you for doing that board survey. Alignment team met on Tuesday and reviewed some of those responses, and we're planning the trainings based on the feedback you gave us. All right, communications, outreach, and advocacy. This is our focus on marketing. So our goal is to continue differentiating the district within the school choice landscape. We, of course, are going to continue assessing our statewide market coverage. Every year we have interested applicants come to us and tell us where they think they want to be. We know the areas of the state where there's a lot of saturation and the areas that really need us, and so we're doing our best to strategically guide those applicants to those places. We obviously have a focus on leveraging that Kids First theme in all of the regions, and then focusing on opportunity zones, those emerging markets, high needs areas. Ultimately, this goal helps us move from just responding to opportunities to be really strategic about when folks come to us. And please, if you have any questions along the way, stop me. Again, in communications, outreach, and advocacy, now we're talking about growth. This goal takes the same idea and applies it directly to developing future schools. We are intentionally recruiting planning committees in communities where additional high-quality options are needed. And of course, we're continuing our workforce centers of excellence and our focus on high-quality authorizing. So our authorizing team does a great job of having really high-quality practices and procedures. And so adding in there, we're going to be working on high-quality replication. One of the things that changed in Act 123 is developing a replication application. So our team will be working with the department to kind of sort out what that looks like and make sure that we get that implemented in a really good way. Moving on, communications, outreach, and advocacy, looking at achievement. So obviously, growth is important for our district, but you heard Superintendent Neely say, we're not looking to be the largest district. Growth has to be quality. And so it needs to be remained connected to quality and student outcomes. We're going to continue to monitor our closing of the achievement gap with our portfolio compared to the state. We're also going to continue working on revising charter goals. So John and his team host workshops and try to get as many schools in to get high quality goals so that we are having really good metrics to measure them on. We're also proposing data health checkups to make sure that the measures that are being used are meaningful and accurate. So again, John's team is going out, and some of those site visits are just to sit down with our school partners and really look at what they have going on in their data and give them some tips and tricks to have really clean data and really meaningful data and help interpret kind of what that means. In supporting a culture of excellence, collaboration. So this is one of the areas I heard throughout the skip level meetings that people say we do it really well, but we can also do it even better. So internally, one of our long-range priorities continues to be to reduce those silos and increase collaboration. Kids First News and the Thing 3 that Superintendent Neely have been doing have created that shared awareness across the teams, but also throughout our schools. So the next step is to create more intentional opportunities for our team members to understand one another's roles. So this is one of those things that we put down briefly when we were transferring schools, and we are picking it back up. We're going to pick back up that cross-team collaboration, and we have a skip day plan, or a switch day planned, not a skip day. Sorry, everybody. Switch day. So when employees better understand each other, what happens upstream and downstream from their work, we can all just work better together. All right. In supporting a culture of excellence, we have strategic communication. So we have strengthening internal staff relationships through strategic communications. Did I skip this slide already? No, okay. So again, kids first messaging, student success stories, tracking engagement. So this is all the work that Brad and his team do. And we'll have Brooke come back to one of our board meetings and talk about how she tracks that engagement on our social media platforms and all the things that we're doing there. But just having an intentionality of getting those school stories and sharing them out. As Chris said earlier, we're storytellers, and so that's really important to share our mission with everybody and let everybody see how we're doing that. All right, in nurturing growth, as you know, partnerships are increasingly important as our portfolio of workforce centers of excellence expands. And so we want to better understand and communicate the network of partners already supporting this work. One of those things is creating a visual map of partnerships around the state. So Brad has started a draft of that. That's just going to be an internal document for us to really examine where we have strong partnerships, where are we lacking, and try to fill in those gaps there. We also wanted professional development around the Workforce Centers of Excellence model so that our staff have a common understanding of the work, but also so that schools understand how that works for them. Continuing in nurturing growth, we have workforce alignment. So finally, we want the portfolio to grow, growth to connect intentionally with South Carolina's workforce needs. Obviously, those needs are a major part of our strategy, so we're really looking at the schools that we have right now, who already has some of this programming in place, and how can we beef that up, but then also looking at some of the models that we already have, and where can we replicate those throughout the state based on workforce needs. At the same time, that Workforce Centers of Excellence designation is not our finish line. So right now the team is looking at coming up with an annual, I don't want to call it a vetting process, but an annual way to really look at those schools that have that designation and make sure that they're continuing that work and meeting those things that they said that they were going to do. So we're adding in a highly polished Workforce Center of Excellence designation event statewide. So those are going to start looking really similar, feeling really similar, and being really highly polished. And then again, that success criteria monitoring. That wraps up our annual plan. Does anybody have questions or comments on what we are planning for the year?
Just a comment, I love the designation for the WCOE. That's a great idea.
Thank you. We can thank Superintendent Neely and Brad and Bo for that work. Anything else? All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. Board, you have this in your packet. Staff, you do not. Oh, I'm skipping along here. Staff, you do not have this in your packet, but you will see it eventually. We're giving the board a little pre-read for their September meeting, and I'm going to walk through the changes. Employee handbook. So starting in December, Eric and Jackie and I met bi-weekly. Eric joined us about once a month, and we went through our employee handbook paired with the Department of Administration handbook side by side and just looked at where are some things that we need to shore up, Where are some areas that we have a really strong practice in place, but our handbook does not reflect that, and just made a lot of revisions and edits. And so what you have, again, is just a pre-read for the September meeting. I'm going to go through what we kind of focused on in some of the changes, but we're asking you to take a good look at that, and we will come back to you in September for a first reading of that, and then a second reading in October. So, like I said, we took that handbook and we're really shifting from a high-level overview to a very comprehensive handbook. There were a lot of places in our current handbook that left some gray areas, and we wanted to shore those up. We aligned it to the Department of Administration handbook where it's appropriate, and then, of course, aligned it to our practices. And those individual policy sections they just give a lot more detail of how we do things. So go ahead.
In all of that consideration, is it ever beneficial for us to go back to the law? So that, I mean, that's an added strength if it's consistent with what you are pursuing. It's good for us to, I think, to.
Yeah, so a lot of it is rooted in law. Yeah, a lot of it is rooted in law, as well as that Department of Administration handbook. And then there were a few things that actually the Act cleared up. Yeah. So this handbook further develops employee compensation section. We have in there a compensation philosophy. It details pay adjustments for things like if you take unpaid leave, if you have administrative leave, those kinds of things. It specifies overtime eligibility, and then it shores up really clear timekeeping practices. And I know it's a very thick document, so I am not asking you to go through it all now, but if you could take a peek at it before our September meeting, that would be great. Professional development. So we've established a more formal professional development policy. It addresses who's eligible, what can be funded, allowable expenses, mission alignment, and the approval process for those professional development requests. And it gives employees and supervisors just much clearer expectations before professional development commitments are made. So we're making sure that those are really meaningful and that they bring back that information to the full staff and their team members so that we can just always be getting better. Performance evaluation. So we've also revised the employee evaluation section. If you remember, sometime last fall, I came to you and talked about how we kind of revised that performance evaluation process from biannually to annually. It, of course, includes employees' performance on our values, on their 2 goals that are aligned to the strategic plan, and then their core job functions. Here, the primary goal is consistency, annual evaluations with clearer expectations, and a more consistent process across the organization. It establishes a PCSD code of conduct, so that is something that our handbook did not have previously. It's grounded in the Unified Code of Ethics and the South Carolina Ethics Act, and most importantly, for employees, it just translates those principles into clear expectations and professional behaviors. Another step that we added is progressive discipline policies. So this is something that we have been implementing for a number of years. It just wasn't reflected in our handbook. So this is a clear progressive discipline policy that aligns the policy with our practices. Our employees do remain at will, but it establishes clear expectations around corrective actions, documentation, processes, and possible disciplinary actions. I think this is particularly important because it gives our supervisors clear steps and guidance when something arises and how to address that. The employee grievance process. The revised handbook also clarifies the grievance process for issues that don't involve termination. Employees will now have clearer steps through raising and solving workplace concerns. Separation from service. So this has been expanded to address resignation, retirement, termination. It also establishes expectations about returning district property, completing the exit process, those kinds of things, and then the focus is on clarity and consistency. Luckily, we don't have to use this section too often. I think mostly retirement, so that's good. Administrative guidance, we're almost done. We've also significantly expanded administrative guidance. It captures many of the operational issues employees and supervisors encounter, like confidentiality, FOIA, media requests, ethics, benefits, leave, payroll, and performance management. And again, the goal here is to make this handbook a resource, give us clear guidelines, not just really a compliance document. So that is a very quick pre-read of all of those edits that we've made over the last 8 months. So the next steps, this is still in a revision process, so we're receiving feedback. If you get into it and you have comments before that September meeting, I'm happy to take those to the team. I will come to you in September for a first reading of that handbook, and then again in October. Questions or comments about the handbook? Probably in the next week or so. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Without further ado, I will hand it to Mr. Eric Norton to talk about Act 123. You've heard so much about it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Enjoyed lunch. It's a pleasure to be here as an employee of the district for the first time. Thank you very much. What we've tried to do today is we've got just a little bit of time set aside for Act 123, and we're doing this in a couple of different ways. Obviously, there are a lot of changes in the Act. So first of all, I wanted to make sure that the board hears how we are letting the schools know about the changes. First of all, there's a one-pager that we have given to the board that sort of summarizes the Act 123 changes, and we emailed it out to you. We've given those to the schools. That bullet point list has also been turned into a checklist, and each team on the staff is also communicating in more detail as to each of those bullet points out to schools in different ways, because every team and every issue has a little bit better way to communicate it than others. So we're trying to give it, with due apologies to John Payne, we're trying to eat the elephant, one bite at a time, because there's a lot of changes to it. One other thing that I think is important for you all to understand about the Act 123 that has made it a little bit of a challenge is that when it was passed with a May 1st effective date. So it was effectively passed so that it has an effective date in the middle of a school year. And so all these changes that were, all of a sudden, you may not, you must not, there became a lot of questions. We have interpreted the Act and then have enforced it such that effectively it's been completely prospective into this school year. So we've been working over the summer to try to communicate with people. So a really good example that has come up is in the Act, there is a requirement for there to be, for the first time for charter schools, DSS registry checks for arguably all employees, which is something even local school districts don't have to do. So we didn't stop people on May 1st in the last month of school and say, okay, you must now do registry checks on all your employees. We've rolled that out over the summer. So I hope that's helpful context to kind of understand where we are. But there is so much to this that it's hard to do. Here's the other thing, and here's one practical tip. If you take nothing away from today, maybe this is helpful. If you look up the Charter Act right now, if you go online and look it up, even on the state legislature website, it's not right. It does not include the changes to Act 123 yet. It has not been published. So if you just go to the Charter Act where you're used to going to look for it, all these Act changes have not been published yet. You have to go separately to the Act and look at the changes and go look at the Charter Act to see what the actual state of the law is right now. That probably won't change until Christmas time or so, before all the sources. So you need to be very careful when, if you're looking for something in the Charter Act between now and Christmas time, to make sure you're looking at the exact right thing. We sent out a couple of those things to you, but make sure you're looking at it. The way you know if you're looking at the right version is if in the definition section it says effective May 1st, 2026. Okay? That's how you'll know. But just make sure you're aware of that, because that is something that may trip you up if you don't know to look. It includes a lot of new definitions. You see there's a picture of Chris looking them up right there. The first definition is, and we talked about it earlier, it eliminates the term sponsor so that the PCSD is now an authorizer. You may think that doesn't matter, but Ms. Mosteller pointed out that words matter. This carries a lot of implication to it. And I will point out that in 2017, when all this process started with the ad hoc committee, this district recommended this change and was met with strong resistance because of the implication that it meant that the author or sponsor was going to be holding people accountable instead of helping them out. And so it tells you we've come a long way in the last few years. So that is a great change and one we've been fighting for a lot of years. Those words really do matter. The other thing is that it does include that nonprofits controlled by IHEs are in the definition authorizer. This is the Erskine setup. Okay, this is how Limestone was set up. This is how Erskine was set up. It effectively codifies what they were allowed to do from 2017 forward without it being in the act. This is something we supported, because if we're going to let them do it as a state, we should acknowledge it and deal with it instead of just letting it occur. So this is something that we all support. We felt like it was important to acknowledge the setup, to acknowledge what was happening. And so it also it was very helpful to our partners over at Erskine who have been dealing with this in the courts and other kinds of things. And so that was a very good change that we think will help clarify things going forward. It does define replication as well. That is a new change. That is something that's been happening since charter school started, but has been ill-defined and on an ad hoc basis itself. That will be very helpful to us. We're anxious to see what that final product looks like, but knowing whether a school can replicate or whether it's a new model, knowing what criteria we're supposed to be looking at in the application phase will be very helpful to us. Okay? So I divided the other changes out in the section into kind of authorizer-related changes and to school-related changes. It is an imperfect way to divide them out, but I did it that way just as a matter of time and to try to sort of bucket things for us to think about. The authorizer practices, the big thing about this is that for the first time, they actually have consequences, which is our little drawing there at the bottom. You'll see our man with a gavel over his head. And so the authorizer practices, what's important to know as we go through these is that what overlays all of this is that the State Department of Education can and must distribute and develop best practices and requirements for authorizers. And on the backside of that, they have to evaluate those annually and can issue sanctions for not following those things. So this is a sea change. This was really the most important part of the Accountability Act. It's where it really started. And we're subject to it just like Erskine is, just like Voorhees is. So all the authorizers are responsible for it. The local districts are accountable to it as well if they are going to continue authorizing charter schools. So it applies to everyone. We have worked carefully with SCDE to establish these policies, procedures, and best practices. We're very thankful to Mika Childs and the office there. Unlike maybe prior administrations and prior offices, she has been very collaborative with the authorizers. She has hosted us all summer long and been very welcoming in our input. What we hope the end product will look like is kind of like an authorizer handbook from the department. Historically, what has happened is that those best practices have been documented by email to one authorizer or the other that then gets passed around in a very informal way. Mika Childs and her office is trying very hard to formalize that into kind of a guidebook and thing. And we are very encouraged by that process. We hope that that gets done. It's well on its way. The other thing that Act 123 does is that it adds detailed processes for application hearings, charter renewals, issuing sanctions, and revoking charters. I put that up there because that is the core of what you board do. Some of our timelines that we have historically used and some of that is that is in our board policies are going to change because they change by statute. So this fall, we're going to be coming to you with some policy changes out of your board manual because we're going to have to change some timelines. It doesn't change a lot of what we do, but it does change some of what we do, and it does change some timelines. So just wanted you to be aware of that, that we will have a little bit of change. Some of it we like, some of it we don't like, but we are grateful for the clarity. The other thing it does is that it does clarify those rules applicable to authorizers, things like whether the Ethics Act applies, whether procurement code applies, things of that nature, regardless of whether they are an IHE or whether they are a statewide district. So that at this point, as far as we can tell, the same rules apply across the board, whether you're an authorizer or not. That was what we asked for, and that's what the legislature delivered on, so we're very pleased with that. I'll kind of stop right there. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the authorization practices piece of this or Act 123? Board or staff? Yes, Cindy?
So do you anticipate that there will be a lot of fill-in? I mean, this is just, that you're briefing us on this, but the SCDE is going to work with you to, this is all going to be what they concur?
Yeah, I do. I think if the SCDE doesn't fill it in, I think we will. I think one of the things you saw with the employee policy handbook, one of the things you saw when Nick did his procurement code and had it done before is we're working really hard towards moving the things to the board level that are policies and moving things to the staff level that are procedures. And what's the gap that you're seeing, Cindy, are the procedures. You know, it sort of says, okay, the process is for professional development or whatever it is. You know, we, the board, are saying, look, the superintendent and the CFO have to sign off on it. And then what we're seeing at the staff level is this is how the superintendent and the CFO are going to go about evaluating and reviewing it. Currently, your policies don't really go into that quite as much. And those gaps have been exposed a little bit because they're just a little bit too generic and too broad in certain areas, and including in some places that federal law requires you to approve some things. So we just need to close a couple of those gaps at the policy level so that the staff has appropriate direction at the procedure level to go forward. This is the same thing. And so it may be that the department will cover some of these gaps. It may be that they won't, but we'll cover them one way or the other. Is there a hand up back there? Perry?
Yes, real quick, John and I talked recently, another change, 594111 with the ACs. There's now an annual requirement that the authorizer ensure that they're in compliance with the data that allows them to be in the AC. They have to give it to us by January 1st, we have to report it to the state by February 1st of the year. So that's something new. And so most of them will fall together with 3 wheels that they will. A lot of that stuff
Yeah, that'd be great, Perry. I think that we're going to run into a lot of things just like that, where there's a lot of lack of clarity, and we're going to have to develop those kind of processes, at the school level and the district level, because I don't think the department's going to move quickly enough, even if they get there. I see John Payne nodding his head up and down. But I think that's really kind of where we are on a lot of these things. And, we'll work as a team together to do that. I know that from, Chris's level, he and I have talked about, I know Emily has talked about, the best way to sort of collect those things as they come up from different teams. And we're still kind of working through that process because it's just so much. And everybody sort of collects it from a different spot. So thank you for that, Perry. We'll make sure that that gets on lists. And if other staff people have things that you need clarity around, please make sure you get it, to your direct supervisors and up the chain so that we can deal with these things. Some of it we asked the department for. Those responses from the department do not come quickly, as they shouldn't, because they have to get approved. And once they become there, we have to oftentimes move faster than that. And we try to project what they'll do, but that's okay. We're used to that. As far as the school practices go, it's interesting. It was supposed to be an authorized or directed bill, but there's plenty of school practices that are in here, and I wanted to make sure you saw a sampling of that. One of the most important ones that is in the act is that it clarifies and adds financial transparency requirements to charter schools. One of the things Nick has done for our schools over the last few years is that he's had them following the state procurement code, which they should have been doing all along. It was necessary for our audit. It was necessary for financial transparency. It was just good practice. There was an argument that charter schools didn't have to do that, but we have been doing it thanks to Nick's leadership on that. Now the act requires it, and our schools are on the front foot and way ahead of schools that have not been doing that. And so that makes a huge difference, and a good example of the way our district has sort of been leading the way on these best practices for schools. And that has been very helpful on doing those things. You guys have been helpful as that as well. If you remember, back in 21, I think it was, Nick, we put the model school district code in place. Some of you weren't on the board then, but those that you were on the board will remember there were a lot of questions around that. It's like, are we sure we want to do this? And we went through the whole process, and now sure enough, that's the law. It's what we're supposed to be doing, and it's helped us on all of our audits and all those kinds of things. Well, now everybody has to do it. And it'll be very helpful. To give you an example of I didn't go through all the things, just a very long list of things that schools have to do. Long story short is they have to do everything that a local public school has to do. So they have to post everything online just like a local public school has to do. Chris, if I say this wrong, let me know, but I believe our philosophy, if I say it right, is, we believe in innovation and we're all for it, and academics and in many areas, but finances is not the place to be creative. Financial transparency is not a place that we want you trying to push boundaries and find new ways to do things. You follow the law on that and do things the way you're supposed to. We're not looking for that. We're not looking for creative accounting practices. It also clarifies and adds conflict of interest requirements for schools. This has to do with what you can and can't do while you're serving on a school board. It unfortunately has had good and bad consequences. Dexter knows this because we've had to deal with it with Liberty, and so it's sometimes it has had some fallout that we found unfortunate. But in the end, it's going to be better off because it's going to end some of the conflicts that have existed between authorizers and schools and school board members and vendors and things of that nature. So we're glad that it like many of these things, we had a lot of say in this, and we appreciated that. We didn't agree with everything, but in the end, we were glad for the clarity. At least we know what the rules are now, so that we don't have to guess. This one is one that's near and dear, I know, to Chris's heart and Brad's heart and John S. Payne's heart. It adds a lot of board training requirements for schools. This is one of the biggest reasons our schools fail is finance and lack of board training, lack of board capacity. And so this gives the authorizers the ability and the obligation to train school boards. It's something we've wanted for a long time, and now it's in the law, and it'll make that process a lot easier. This one was one that was driven by state law. The racial composition requirement has been replaced with community engagement requirement. Without getting into a lot of detail, it was a bad law to start with. It was based on a percentage of demographics that was unclear, and nobody knew exactly how to apply it anyway. Now it's based on making sure that there's not discrimination in the way in which you engage the community and the way in which you recruit, instead of just an arbitrary percentage of students that meet certain demographic requirements. It's a huge improvement in the law for many reasons, in my opinion. And then the last one is this one, and you saw it today. I don't know how many of you really picked up on it, but there is now a provision in the law that defines and limits asynchronous instruction in core subjects and clarifies attendance requirements for virtual students. Y'all remember from COVID the difference between asynchronous and synchronous instruction. Our Charter Act now defines it and says essentially if it is asynchronous, it is effectively self-paced work that the students can do. They can watch it on their own time. These can be recorded lessons. It can be anything. They don't have to have a teacher that is there in real time with them. Synchronous means the teacher's there in real time with them. Right now the law says that it is at least 25% of it has to be synchronous, and 75% can be asynchronous. Think about that a minute. So 75% of it can be asynchronous without a teacher there. Okay? The original proposal, the original draft of the bill that went around was reversed. The original draft of the bill it had to be 75% synchronous, and then it could only be 25% asynchronous. Somehow in that process it got changed. We did not ask for that change. So I would keep my eye on that one for potential changes. I'm not sure that those percentages are going to stay. I don't know where they came from. I don't think there's any logic to them particularly. I mean, to my knowledge, there's nothing magic about the 75 and 25 other than you add them up and you get 100. And so I did that in my head, Chris. I really don't know, but I'd keep my eye on that one. That seems like a lot of asynchronous time. I'm not sure everybody's going to be happy with that when they realize what that really means. So those are the key aspects of Act 123. I skipped a bunch. As Perry showed you, there are infinite number of details that have to be worked through in this, but I hope that gives you kind of a broad overview of how this kind of affects schools, how it affects authorizers, and how much work there is to do over the next year to get all this pulled together. Any other questions or comments?
So comment, the community engagement piece, I think that's still got to be very intentional there, but that can become its own controversy.
It is. So for those of you that have followed that, the Supreme Court essentially knocked out the disparate impact requirements in discrimination law this year. It's gone. The 20% was sort of an arbitrary number that came from, again, same thing with the asynchronous. I don't know where that number came from. I mean, it was there when I started doing charter school work. But it kind of came out of that disparate impact analysis stuff, and that stuff's been stricken. It doesn't exist anymore. It's out. It doesn't exist. So you have to actually look and see an actual act of intentional discrimination now in the way in which you engage the community in order to prove discrimination. You can't just look at it and say, because what it did in disparate impact analysis is it would flip the burden. So it would say if you do not meet certain percentages of demographics, you have to prove that you did not discriminate. And so they just said that really is a problem as a matter of law because you're proving a negative. You're proving I did not discriminate.
That's on both sides, not just
Proving it's on both sides. And that proves on both sides. And so all of that stuff in the law is getting changed in any number of ways all across the country. And that was the way they fixed it in the Charter Act. Any other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, there you go. I like energy, and you guys bring energy to what you do. I was listening to an interview that was done like 15 years ago with Warren Buffett, and he was talking about successful people, successful organizations. And the interviewer asked him, said, what's the number one thing you recommend people focus on when they want to be successful? He said, you said the word in your question. It's focus. And you focus this organization like a laser beam on kids, and you've arrived at a point to where you've grown. I didn't think you were going to go this fast, just like Chris did. When he and I started working together at first, it was 15,000 students. But now, you're at 30 plus in 7 years. That's tremendous. So give yourselves a round of applause for that accomplishment. When I first came on board with you all, Chris and I had worked at the Meyer Center in Greenville on a strategic plan, and he called me and he said, Stan, I need some help. I had one organization before, now I got the state. So can you come down and help us do some strategic planning with the district office? And I said yes, because I enjoyed working with him in Greenville. And when I came on board, the thing that I do, that I think I do best, is bring together different components, take them apart first, but then integrate the good pieces so that they make up a new foundation for something to be accomplished. And you all have embraced that in the work that you do. All of the presentations you heard here today indicate to me that you're on the right path, okay? And so what I want to do is share with you some of the things that we did in order to get here starting 6 or 7 years ago, because that's going to define how you go forward. Because you're at a space and time. I have a tool that I was trained and certified to use, and it's one that very, very algorithm-driven tool that talks about organization's timeline of growth. And it talks about the components that add to that growth. It's called a core capacity assessment tool. I can't use that tool with all organizations, but I can use it as a lens to look at you. And that's what I've been doing in the 6 years that I've been working with you. So you've had some components that have made this organization very successful. And the first thing you do is incorporate best practices. I use BoardSource as a reference because they have some of the best practices in the industry for nonprofits, for governmental organizations, and they define an exceptional organization, and you have become one. Why? Because the district excels at achieving their mission because their board of trustees provide high-level vision, effective leadership and oversight, ensures adequate resources, and provides sound stewardship of the organization's assets while complying with all the regulations, guidelines to ensure that the district puts kids first in everything you do. Now, in order to consolidate a lot of complexity, and anything associated with government for me is complex. So you got to break things down so that you can make sense of them and get them done. Well, this is what you've done here. You took effective governance with your board of trustees, integrated it with strategic planning that we first started doing 6 years ago. We went through another iteration in 2024 to get the 25-28 plan done. We've integrated some best practices, and me working with Emily and her team and some of you that we've done some executive coaching with to make sure that we're all synchronized and on the same page, sharing some ideas and some concepts so that you work together in sync with that mission, kids first, and then you embrace Kaizen. When I introduced Kaizen to you,
Years ago, some of you looked at me kind of strange and went, what is that? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that again today, because you have incorporated the thinking that goes inside of Kaizen in everything you do here. Kaizen is about continuous improvement. It's the art of that. So when we look at the things that the board has done, and you've seen this before because this was part of the training that we went through years ago. When you look at your role and responsibility and the things that you're responsible for, that you've carried out as a whole, as a unit, because you're the highest level of leadership for this district office and this public charter school district. You ensure compliance with federal and state requirements, governance, fiduciary oversight, and financial management. Chris talked about that, and he indicated we're doing this well. We're doing what other organizations are not doing. You came up and rewrote your mission and vision statement so that it was clear and it clarified what your purpose was. And then you started evaluating performance of the whole organization. And you as a board, your responsibility is to make sure Chris is evaluated in a timely fashion. If you've done that, and you're moving on in a direction in the same, along the same path, you provided strategic and organizational planning. You've managed resources and budgets. I heard you say you got a surplus. I work with a lot of organizations. I never get to hear that, because everybody wants more money. They run out. And so you're doing that very well. You monitor your portfolio programs and services to make sure that they are consistent with you delivering your mission. You protect and enhance the public image of this district, and as a unit, the Board of Trustees, part of your responsibility is to advocate for the work that you do. And then you assess the board's performance as a governing body of the district. That's something I want to encourage you to make sure you do annually. Look at yourselves and ask yourself, what are we not doing that we need to be doing? How do we get better? Because see, now you're in a process of continuous improvement and you're in a circle. You got to keep getting better and better. And if I turn that sideways, it's a spiral up. And when you look at your numbers, they rise. You follow me? So when we look at these expectations, you got to look at the individual as well. What do each of you bring to the table? Well, you need to understand those laws, the regulations, the guidelines. And you got to really know the mission so you can speak that. And that's one thing that makes me very proud to be a part of this group, is that you all are synchronized in what you say and what you do. You act on one accord. You read and understand the financial statements and the audits that's required to give you the results that you're getting, and you're advocating. Everywhere I go, I brag about you guys. I don't do that with anybody else, because you're following through and you're getting things done. You're growing and you're progressing along a really rapid rising trajectory. You leveraging your connections and your networks. You're preparing each other for attending meetings and participating and engaging. When I spoke with Emily, I think 2 years ago, we were talking about a board onboarding process to make sure that you all got what you need when you come on board so you can hit the ground running. You're doing that, and I applaud you for it. So participating in committees, also important, because each of you brings something different to the table. So my job as a person who does leadership development is, how can I leverage what you bring to the table? How can I leverage what you bring to this organization so that you deliver on your mission? And you're doing that. You're in sync with that. And that's something to be admired. That's why I brag about you guys all the time. So you also follow the bylaws, got the conflict of interest stuff. I'm covering a lot of stuff that John does in his training with other schools to make sure that they're on the same accord. And the one thing I like about what I hear out in the community when I'm wearing a different hat is y'all speak with one voice. And that's important, because I've seen boards where people go out and give their opinion, but it doesn't represent the opinion of the whole board, and it creates controversy. You don't do that. And so when I look at these things and I integrate the best practices into You as individual members, you built a healthy relationship with your superintendent. Y'all communicate well with each other. You're on the same page. I get energy every time this guy opens his mouth. That's the first time I've told him that, by the way, and I've known him 7 years, 8 years now. But he brings energy to the table, and you use that to do good work. Focusing on listening and not just participating. Some boards, you have people that do all the talking and everybody else just sits there. You're not leveraging them. Everyone has to engage and participate. So listen to what people are saying and help build on their ideas. You do that. Balance, giving Chris and his team ample room to operate without micromanaging what they do, because his leadership is strong, your leadership is strong. All you got to do is synchronize around a plan. And we're going to talk about your plan here in a second, because you did a good job in creating that as well. Each of you should be encouraged to ask naive questions. There are no dumb questions. Ask, because if it's something you need to know, there's probably somebody sitting beside you who wants to know the same thing, but they're afraid to ask. Serve as an ambassador by advocating for this organization and what it does for kids and putting kids first. And then remain energetic about learning about this organization. As I mentioned, you're growing right now. You're in a continuous improvement loop, and I'm going to show you that loop here in a second because it's important. So that's your individual and group responsibilities. And when you look at all of that, you have to bring it together. You bring it together with a strategic plan. And you all went through a very deliberate 6-month process when I first came on board. And we talked to a lot of people. I mean, I had so much data, I almost got a headache from it because we had so many input points to it. But synchronizing that into a concise vision statement, mission, values, strategic focus areas, a SWOT analysis, bringing all those ideas together to come up with the right strategic focus areas and the long-term goals and objectives that Emily just went through, you all did that. But then you got synchronized, and we had a 4-year plan. You completed it in 3 years. I've never seen that done before. Most people write a strategic plan, they stick it up on the shelf, and then when it comes funding time, they start looking at it because they know they need something that they can reference back to what they're doing. You finished your plan in 3 years, and you called me and said, we need another one. Now, these guys can't be doing that, but sure enough, they were. And so we generated your 25-28 strategic plan that you have now, and some of that annual plan, which you see here. You take your long-term goals, turn them into yearly objectives. That's what Emily was sharing with you, and then action plans. And this is why I think you all are most effective in your continuous improvement loop. Every person in this room can see themselves in that annual plan. So you have a role and responsibility and ownership to making sure that this organization is successful in the work you're doing. And with all the changes happening outside, external from this organization, you've embraced those. I know the last 6 months have got to be one of the busiest times of your lives, but you stepped up and you responded to that. Why? Because you're focused on kids first. And that's so important when you bring things together and keep them simple using the ideas around Kaizen. Kaizen is so important in simplifying things. When I was first introduced to this concept as an engineer, it made my life so much easier because I had been out there working, designing complexity to put into the system, and I was wondering why no one else understood what we were doing. So you turn it around and you simplify it and you share it, and that simplification should allow you to bring more people into an inclusive process. And that's why Kaizen works. It's the art of continuous improvement. And here's the definition of it. It's a Japanese term. You've heard that before. If you go to BMW, Michelin, GE, or down at the hospital systems, you'll hear about Kaizen a lot. We just completed a Kaizen project in Spartanburg to transform a community that was in ruins, basically. We transformed that community into a preferred place to live now, using some of the basic concepts. And I shared the video with Chris and Emily. There's a YouTube out on it. It's gone viral, basically, to show people how to do this in their neighborhoods. But Kaizen is about how do you become good through change? Because change always happens. When I'm doing this training for a group of people, I always put that number up on the screen, 186,282, and ask, does anybody know what's unique about that number? And folks will say, maybe. And then I say, it has something to do with Star Trek. Has anybody in here ever watched Star Trek? So you know what this is, right? Live long and prosper. That's a greeting. That's Mr. Spock. He's a Vulcan. 186,282 miles per second is what? The speed of light. The speed of light is the only thing in our galaxy that never changes. Everything else changes. Some things change fast, some things change slow. But the speed of light is the only thing that's a constant. So knowing that, shouldn't we understand something about change? Well, that's what Kaizen is about. It's about process of continuous improvement, and it's about keeping it simple. So how do we use that? Kaizen sits on a foundation of what we call PDCA. PDCA says plan the work, do the work, check the work and learn something from what you did, and then act on what you find, and then you do it all over again. It's a continuous loop. So it's a learning loop as well. So if you're doing things well and you're growing and you're evolving, you keep doing what you're doing, and you keep improving it until it gets better and better. Now, when I first saw this, I thought there was something called the 80-20 rule. You get 80% of it right, you can move on to something else. Well, that does work. But if you can keep the mindset that allows you to continuously improve everything you have influence or control over, you can make a big difference. And that's what we try to train people to do when we train them how to do continuous improvement. It works in manufacturing. It works in grocery stores. I went to a Food Lion the other day, and the checkout lady was doing some things, and she says, "Oh, we're working on this improvement process. Can you help me with this?" And I went, "Whoa, what, are you doing Kaizen here?" She said, "Yeah." Hey, I'm coming back here. Because their prices were going down. Remember, grocery prices are going up everywhere, right? Theirs were coming down. Why? They embraced this. They start taking cost out of their process of selling goods to their people. And so this works. You're doing that here, all right? You're in your second iteration of strategic planning now, and you're growing. And if you do Kaizen right, here's what happens. You start out on a level, you make little changes, you go up, normalize, go up, normalize, go up. You're climbing stairs, right? The only thing I caution you on, this is what you just did. And I encourage you, with the diagram Chris showed you, that had the things on it that talked about who we are, what we do, and what we deliver, you've got to normalize your culture to make sure that it's still agile and people are flexible, they're growing and they're developing so that they can continue this journey. Because you made a big jump, right? You got a lot more people you're responsible for. Make sure you normalize your culture. And Emily and I have had conversations about that, and she's doing some things around leadership development within her group of people. That's how you do that. You grow people when you grow organizations, okay? So we're working on these things now. So here's some definitions about Kaizen. It has to do with growth, movement, change, and sustainability. Now, growth, anytime you have personal growth and development, it requires you to change something. Because if you stay the same, you can't grow. But if you're growing, you got to change something. So you got to understand how change happens to everyone, because everyone goes through different types of changes. It requires movement. You can't sit still and do Kaizen. It's a dynamic process. If you're sitting and waiting, you get left behind. You're not sitting and waiting with this organization. As Chris and Cindy said, you're leading. You're blazing a trail for other districts to look at you and say, wow, why are they being so successful? I remember the years when they said, no, them charter schools, we shouldn't be funding them more. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be doing this, taking money away. Well, y'all need to step your game up because these guys are blazing a trail. And if you don't change some of the things you're doing now and don't put kids first, the state loses. And you're helping the state to win. The economic race we're in right now, I've never seen anything like this before. We are growing like crazy. I was at a meeting the other day and they were talking about the number of people moving to South Carolina. I'm like, Lord have mercy, where are we going to put them? You know, you can't even buy a house up in the upstate right now. They're building them so fast, and people who own houses are getting cash offers for them. Folks are riding around neighborhoods with briefcases full of money wanting to buy houses. That's how bad it's gotten, because the work is there. And that's gonna continue. Change and sustainability is where I'm at with where you guys are right now. You're mastering change, so now you gotta sustain it. Sustain it by stabilizing, because change happens two ways. You get revolutionary change and you get evolutionary change. You were going through an evolutionary process before. That's what I was trying to help you navigate. Well, when the schools closed down, other district closed down, you went through a revolutionary change. And the only way you control that is you got to stabilize and sustain your assets to the point to where they're still operating at a high efficiency and effectiveness level. That's your next job, your next challenge. How do we stabilize this so that we keep moving forward and keep adding value to what we do? Does that make sense? Okay. So, what does that mean for you as board members? You got to seek out simplicity. One of my favorite actors when I was growing up, when I was a little guy, was Bruce Lee. I love Bruce Lee, and it wasn't because he could kick and hit people with kung fu. I like those sounds he made. Wow! Simplicity was what Bruce Lee was all about. He was such a good fighter because he could figure out the shortest distance he had to move his hands or his feet to hit you. And that gave him quickness and agility that other people didn't have. Well, simplicity is the key to what you have to do next. Eric just read to you Act 1, 2, 3. Complex, right? So the question you ask yourself is, how can we simplify how it impacts us and what we do? And how can we make it to where we can explain it to the people who are going to be affected by this? That's what simplicity should do for you. And I always do that by asking some basic questions. What does this mean for us? And how will this impact our current plans, or how will it impact kids? And start having those kind of deliberations and discussions. It's about prioritizing. When change happens, one thing that throws people off is they got a bunch of ideas and they try to focus on all of them at the same time. Well, the way Stan practices Kaizen is you get 3. Focus on first. At the most, 5. So 3 to 5 is my number. If I can do that and do number 1 first, and then move on down to 2, 3, and get them done in that order, I'll stay sane. But if I try to do 10 things at one time, I will eventually overwhelm myself. So focus by prioritizing and define what are the 3 to 5 things we need to do first. So when a new idea or new opportunity comes up and you're having a discussion about it in the boardroom, ask what are the first 3 things we should do with this? And how are we going to carry those things out? Getting ahead of situations or issues, I also use as a lens the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it always talks about begin with the end in mind, keep things simple, and to be proactive. You're a proactive organization. You're way ahead of everybody else that you're competing with, right? How do you stay that way? You stay proactive, and you put yourself into situations where you can lead change and not just respond to it. See, a lot of people are reactionary. You're doing well because you're a proactive organization. And I can say this from my perspective because I know kind of what some of the plans are. You're hiring proactive people. Organizations that have proactive people lead other organizations that are reacting. They'll be looking to you for guidance. Okay? So keep doing these things. And so what does all of this mean? Well, you're leading forward. Congratulations. That's where you're at right now. You're leading forward. Pathway to success moving beyond this point is to continue building your board leadership. Okay? Simplify some of the complexity that you're dealing with and make sure that you all stay on the same page with the direction you're going in. The staff, developing, leading, you got a great team here. I got a chance to work with some of them, and boy, you got people who are proactive, they're positive, they're hungry for information, they're hungry for new ideas, new ways of doing things so that they can simplify the complexity that they run into on a day-to-day basis. That's rare to get that, but you have that here. And I compliment Emily and her team on some of the things that they're working on, because she's now doing meetings where she can figure out where are we with different things and different people, so she can keep her hands around it. She calls them skip level meetings. I've never heard them called that before, but they're very effective. Staff leadership is very important, because at the end of the day, you got to grow people. When I was in a simulation once with the CEO of Honeywell as a coach, we're running the simulation at the Center for Creative Leadership, and I'm doing my strategic planning thing and making sure the business is running, and he pulled me aside, he grabbed me by the shirt, and he said, "Stan, you're getting ready to crash and burn." I said, "Why?" He said, "You got great strategies, you got great ideas, but at the end of the day, you bet on people, and you don't have your hands around your people yet." I'm like, okay, so what do I need to do? 1, 2, 3, do this first, then get back on your strategy. At the end of your day, you're betting on all these people. They have to deliver for you, so keep that simple. Make sure that they are growing and developing, maintaining your good retention rates, because you got good folks here, and there's a shortage out there, people, I'm gonna tell you that. So all of this leads to positive change, which you've been managing for the last 6 years. You've been evolving, you've been growing. If I can take that stairwell that I showed you earlier, turn it to the side, this is what you're doing. You're a coil. You're spiraling upward. And I want to see you continue to do that. So keep doing what you're doing, strategic thinking, strategic planning, board governance, advocating and messaging, stay on the same page with that. Engage diverse perspectives, because you're getting a lot of challenges from different situations that you're having to face. Bringing that perspective to the board is very, very powerful. Bringing it to the staff level, very, very powerful. Always be willing to reflect with your partners here. Bounce ideas off of each other. That's when brainstorming becomes a powerhouse. And don't forget Kaizen and keep it simple. And with our staff, operational excellence. That's what your goal is. If you can do that, you can deliver all the rest of this. And you're on the right path to doing that. You're doing a lot of that now. Okay, and I congratulate you on that. So I want to thank you for your accomplishments, your achievements. I hope this has been helpful today. It was kind of a big picture reminder of this is where I saw you when you started. Now I'm looking at you like this and going, wow, that's impressive. and you followed a path that has been very deliberate, very intentional, and you're still growing and developing. And moving forward, as Mr. Spock say, live long and prosper. You know, keep up the good work. Are there any questions I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
Stan, I just want to congratulate you. Thank you for bringing in this principle of small is big.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really such a nice thing to know that you can break things down like that
Absolutely.
and leave those pieces then behind.
Mm-hmm.
And their work.
Absolutely.
Really open a small world that's very big.
And that's what it's all about. But as Chris mentioned, it's the same with children. They got a spark. We got to find it. And we got to highlight it. It's no different than that with ideas. We got to simplify them, then find that simplicity, and then make them happen. Okay? Thank you for that comment. Any other questions? Well, I'm always proud to be a part of this family. I kept calling myself your strategy advisor, and Chris says, no, you're a member of the family. And he kept saying that. I believe that now. Okay, so I'm always honored to be here with you, and if there's anything I can do to help you move forward down the road, then you know how to reach me. So I'm looking forward to continuing to celebrate your success together, and thanks for allowing me 20 to 30 minutes to talk to you here today. Thank you.
Promise we're going to get out of here on time. It's 2:21. Just a few things. First of all, Stan, you are part of the family. You've been a part of my family now for almost a decade now. You shorted our relationship a little bit. And you're a game changer for organizations across the state. I mean, you see things that many of us just can't see. And I just appreciate the fact that you love this team so much and our board, and that you care so much about kids that you're willing to invest your time and your mind to help all of us just be better leaders. So thank you very much. And I want to thank you and Emily Paul both, because y'all have made just such a great team the last almost 7 years now. And I think we should give both of them a round of applause, because we have to hold ourselves accountable. And we have to have partners on our team who are working together to ensure that we're staying aligned with the mission, vision, and values and the motto that we all care about. I'd be remiss if I didn't share just an update about Dr. Pope. And some of you might not know this, but she couldn't be here today because for 5 years, her husband George has been waiting on a kidney transplant. And when you get the call on that, you go. And they went, and they're down at MUSC, and he had the surgery 2 days ago, and she called me a little while ago and said, it's still taking. So I know many of you have been praying, but I think we need to give an amen for that. Amen. Because that's big. She seems so relieved. This has been something they've been praying about for so long, and she said George is just so happy. And they will have to stay down at Charleston for about another week. They're going to move into a hotel hopefully tomorrow, and then every day George has to go in for tests and just to check and make sure everything's going well. But I told her that I would let all of you know about what's going on, and just please keep them in your thoughts and prayers, because this has been a journey. But I'm excited. She seems really excited, and George seems real happy in the background. So we are going to do some special things for them, and Marlene is taking care of that. And then don't kill me when I ask y'all to do this, but this is such a pretty setting outside. I know you know what I'm about to ask you to do. We'll make it quick, because my kids, they just want to kill me every time we do a family photo, and it's. But we're going to get outside. We're going to line up real quick. We'll get a great photo outside. And Nate, do you mind taking the photo of all of us? And Brad, we'll use your phone. And I say, when we exit here, let's just go outside. Matthew, don't put the tie back on. It might go on social media. You can be on social media without a tie. Because it's 100 degrees. But this is special, and I don't think we realize how special it is for us to have this kind of conversation as a family until years later. And I think back, because Stan was helping me recall a lot of the work that many of us did so long ago that has transformed this district and brought us to where we are and brought new members to the family. Because so many of you are new, and now you're part of that culture. So I want us to get a photo. I promise it's going to be fast. And then finally, I want to just say, we talk about the spark of the child, and I want you to know that I see the spark in each of you. I see that every day you come to work. I see that in the work that you do, the innovative solutions that you bring to the table to help make this district more effective and more efficient by putting kids first. So let's go run, get a quick photo, and then we come back inside and get some water.